Graham, you put this screenplay together almost as if it were a puzzle itself. I'm curious, as you're starting to write it, was that part of your thinking?
Yeah, that was very much the thinking. There was sort of this idea that, Alan Turing was obsessed with puzzles, codes, games. They were so fundamental to his life, and so the whole movie would be a puzzle, a code, a game. So we would take these 3 time periods of his life, the 50s with his arrest and persecution, the 40s with his wartime work at Bletchley Park, and then the 1920s with his sort of first falling in love, first being exposed to cryptography, and the sort of intertwining of those 2 events in his heart and in his mind, and sort of take these 3 time periods and chop them up out of order, present them to you, the audience, as a puzzle, as a code. And so you're trying to solve the puzzle of Alan the same way Alan would be trying to solve a puzzle?
So I had met Graham actually on a staffing meeting when I was working in television as an assistant, and we just stayed in touch, and I was having a party at my house and invited Graham, who at the time was, I think, working with my roommate, and I was sort of doing the song and dance, you do when you're not working and letting people not feel sorry for you. And I said I had optioned this book, and he actually overheard and interrupted the conversation and said, I've been obsessed with Alan Turing my whole life, and, one day that's going to be my passion project. And fortunately, there was no one else knocking, so but we still made him pitch us.
There was a time where we sort of took it to the studio system, and it never really felt like an organic fit at a studio. It definitely wasn't in their, sort of rubric of the types of things they were making. So after they sat on it for about a year, we thankfully got it back. It reverted back to us. And during that time, Graham's script topped the blacklist, so there was more and more attention on it. So
the blacklist being the top unproduced screenplays in Hollywood.
Right. So when we got it back, thankfully, there were a lot of people who were interested in potentially coming on board and helping us to finance it. But our issue was primarily finding a partner who had the same creative vision for the project and who was really passionate and intent on bringing it to the screen. And that's when we crossed paths with Teddy.
Well, thank you. That's
I like how this is working, just right down the line.
No, we can go all
and then we're
day.
going to get to some actors very soon.
And from my standpoint, I was very lucky for the 3 of us and Graham to come together with a shared vision for the type of film that we hope to make, and to try and protect the legacy of Alan Turing while at the same time trying to make something interesting, cinematic, that has a number of different genres intertwined. And I think that we started out looking as an American writer and 3 American producers looking for a British director, because that just sort of seemed to make sense. And it just happened that we met this crazy Scandinavian Viking in Morten Tyldum.
I always loved history. I thought I knew history really well, and I was shocked how much of it I didn't know. And it saddened me in many ways also, because it felt that this man should be, he should be in the front cover of my history book when I was at school. And why didn't I know more about him? And I became obsessed. And also, I was an outsider at Hollywood at that time. Maybe, and this to me is a movie about outsiders. A movie about, to me it became, the heart of it is sort of like a celebration of being different, and how this man could do these amazing things because he wasn't burdened down by normality. His thoughts could soar free, and it became a very important movie. And of course, it's you throw yourself up on a deep end when if you're going to do a English language film, and it's a character-driven, dialogue-driven British period movie. There's nothing you can hide behind. There's no explosions. There's nothing. You have to get this right. And but I didn't have to say any of the dialogue. So. And so thank God.
It was great when he tried, though.
Actually, I've acted out me and Graham. We spent 6 to 8 months together polishing the script, and we acted out the script many times.
Just the 2 of us. It was really, I would always play Keira's part, and Morten would do Benedict's. I don't know why I got typecast.
Graham was always Joan.
I was always Joan. Yeah, we're so glad that there is no video or audio recording of that, by the way. It's the worst thing you've ever seen. I'm so glad, Keira, that you didn't have to see any of that. That would be...
Keira and Benedict, was this story at all familiar to you, or is it not well known even in the UK?
I'd first read about it, I think, in about 2009, where there was a big push in the media in England to try and get a pardon for him. And I remember reading it in the Guardian newspaper, and being totally shocked that I didn't know. I mean, and as somebody who does love history, and particularly that period, and of course I'd read sort of about Bletchley Park, but didn't specifically know about Alan Turing and what he did and what had been done to him. I was really shocked, and actually had a conversation. I was meeting my agent that day, and remember we had lunch and talking about him, because she'd known a little bit more because of Breaking the Code, right, which had been a theatre play and then on television. And then a couple of years later, she said, "Do you remember that Alan Turing conversation? Well, they're making a film and they've offered you a part, so do you want to do it?" And actually, even before reading the script, went, "Yes, I want to be a part of this."
Good thing you wrote a good script. Benedict.
I'd seen Breaking the Code on television a long time ago now, but Derek Jacobi is extraordinary as Alan Turing, and it made a real impact on me then, although I stayed away from it, obviously, before creating our version of Alan. One of the reasons I wanted to do it was how shocked I was at how little I knew, though, even despite the play, or the vague memory of the play, mainly dominated, like I said, by the extraordinary performance of Derek Jacobi. I thought this is sort of, it's the sickening irony at the end of a film where you see a man who is utterly betrayed by the democracy and country and culture that he helped save from fascism being punished in the way he's punished for his sexuality. That is completely, for me, amplified by thinking, why the hell do we all not know about this man? Why is he not on banknotes with Newton and Darwin? Why is he not on history books like Morten said, and social books? And he has a heroic status, and yet through an amalgamation of certain circumstances, he's been overlooked. I think partly because of the Official Secrets Act, partly because of his demise and the shameful stain on our culture that is, and also partly because he wasn't interested in promoting himself. He could have had that paper that could have won him the prize if he'd written about algorithms in the early part of his career. And I think he pursued artificial intelligence a little bit more in terms of self-publicizing later in his life and his career. But he never had that one moment that could have, marked him in the scientific firmament. But it was very much one of the reasons I wanted to try and do some justice to him and spread his legacy and his story to a broader audience. It was one of the attractions to this really incredible script that I read. And I was here doing Star Trek. I was playing Khan for JJ, and in one of the off days from being a psychopathic, super-engineered space thing, I read this script and could sort of hear Elgar and being transported back to the homeland. But in all seriousness, just the way he unravelled with the mystery of Enigma was so beautiful. And the way you meet him, he's so unapologetic. Mm-hmm. It's funny, but he's very determined and particular and awkward, and a character that's not afraid of not being liked, which is a sort of joy. You don't feel you're being patronised by meeting this nice chap who was very brilliant.
How much reference is there about the way he spoke, what he looked like, the way he walked, or you have to kind of create a whole cloth? Nothing.
No, yeah. There's no footage. There's no audio or film footage of him. There are photographs of him, stills of him reposing, posing. There are stills of him running. But as far as his speech pattern goes, the very particular stammer he had. His physicality, the way he held himself, his way of making eye contact or choosing not to and averting his gaze, the way he held his pen and his appearance, his motion through landscapes and his interaction with people. That was all. It's anecdotally very, very richly described in some fantastic biographies, and I was fortunate enough to meet a couple of people who knew him, but there was no first-hand sort of source material to base my interpretation on. It was by description.
I think it made complete sense to both of us that it was a great friendship and a meeting of minds, and I think from my point of view it made complete sense that she'd choose partnership over necessarily a romantic sort of love, and particularly given that era, if she'd gone with somebody who perhaps she would have had a great sexual relationship with and all the rest, she would have been pretty much tied to a kitchen sink, and with this person, her brain was allowed to be engaged in what she was totally passionate about. So I thought that made complete sense.
And that conversation happened where he said, I can't go through this, I'm a homosexual man, this isn't right for you or for me. And she did define their relationship in the terms that Keira's just echoed and say, look, this is better than most people have, this is an extraordinary thing, and it's more than enough for me, and we can make this work. And he felt he couldn't. He felt he would be living too much of a lie to his true nature. But you're right, it is a story about love rather than sexuality. It's a story about a man who's not allowed to love because his love is a banned and punishable love. Even saying those words just seems so alien to me. But sadly, we still live in a time where it seems wherever nationalism rears its head, the same prejudices, the same scapegoats are made out of minorities, and gay men are at the forefront of that abuse, whether it's in Russia or in the Middle East or Turkey or Greece with the Golden Dawn, and it hasn't gone away. It's not a history lesson, sadly. But going back to the film, it's very much about that, very much about a man who wasn't allowed to love.
I mean, you imagine that here's this guy, 27 years old, comes right out of university, and now he's sort of recruited by MI6, keeping these incredibly difficult top-level state secrets for the secret intelligence services. He's sort of finding himself in the middle of like a real-world thriller with the fate of the free world on the shoulders of this 27-year-old mathematician. It's remarkable. So the sort of tension of that and the pressure of that and the mystery of that is something it was so important to us to convey. And so, what we wanted to do was sort of explain how he broke the code in sort of a big conceptual way. So, but what you saw in the film is true. I mean, that's how they did it. The technical term is crib-based cryptography, for those of you who really care about the technical term. But it's this idea that you could break the code by using words that you already knew were going to be in the message, so-called cribs. No one in the history of cryptography had ever done that before Alan Turing. It was this sort of hinge moment in the history of cryptography. And so the silly starting messages, the CILLY, weather, Heil Hitler, this really was how they broke the code. And so we sort of tried to show you and really convey to the audience in a big picture way, like how ingenious this was and how ingenious it was to sort of figure that out.
You have obligation to really tell the story truthfully and what really happened. At the same time, you have to make it engaging because his life deserved that. You have to tell a movie. We didn't want it to be sort of like a dusty history lesson. We wanted it to be a fun, thrilling, and engaging film because that's what his legacy deserves.
Keira, I'm going to have the last question for you, and I want to give you a couple of footnotes. One is Alan Turing was in a movie not that long ago where he was a straight man in a love triangle. And secondly, at the NSA in the United States right now, the Society of LGBT Agents is called the Alan Turing Society. This is obviously a period film, but I'm curious what you think its modern relevance is and what you hope people take away from The Imitation Game.
Well, to talk about Joan's character from that, what I thought was fascinating, which is obviously shown in the film, is the idea of a woman who is in a man's world and can't find her place in it, isn't allowed into the room, isn't allowed her place at the table, which is true to what happened. What we didn't cover in the film, but is true to Joan's story, is the fact that once she did get into the room and she was doing exactly the same job as men, she was paid a fraction of what all of the men were paid.
Oh, that doesn't happen anymore.
No. Well, and that's sort of what I thought was interesting, because you look at the feminist argument today and what are we fighting for? It's a place at the table and equal pay. Right. And what was she fighting for in 1943? It was a place at the table and equal pay. So, and I think, as Benedict said before as well, prejudice hasn't gone away, and this is a film that is trying to celebrate differences because we have to, because continually we don't, and people get destroyed because of it. So, I don't think that you can have a more relevant story, really.